From the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli here on a Wednesday in February. We are a week out from the first pitcher and catcher debut, spring debut. Their first workout, I think you could say. Their first bullpen sessions down in Sarasota, Florida. It is right around the corner. As cold and awful as it feels in Baltimore, it is sunny and warm in Sarasota, and we're going to be there in a week, John. It's going to be so nice.
Yeah, we're going to find out early on in this episode whether my wife listens to it. I am so excited to go to Florida. Today was the first day back in school for students at Francis Scott Key Elementary Middle School. Mm-hmm. The last day was the Friday before Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
It is a long time ago, Paul. It's been I felt like I realized at some point last week I've been kind of like Bill Belichick, just like mumbling to myself and like muttering through sentences and just being like, we just got to take it a day at a time and focus on our jobs and just that was the mentality. You had to do your job and get through it. And I did, and now we're on the other side of that particular deal. And it's going to be a challenge at the ranch while I'm not there in Florida, and I'm in Florida, but I'm going to be glad to be in the place where it's warm and I may be a little quiet.
Are the two little ones making the trip at all?
Not this time. We might go back in March. We have my wife's aunt and uncle bought a house in Bradenton, so It might be a little bit of a double dip and get to.
Is it the Tigers that play in Bradenton?
In the Pirates.
And the Pirates. Okay.
The Pirates are in Bradenton, right up the road from Sarasota, which is, proximally
sure
close to Sarasota, but is not convenient to get to and fro Sarasota on a daily basis, as I learned last year while staying with my family.
Yeah, and also it is early mornings at spring training. It's going to be a lot of getting up early before the sun rises, driving into the ballpark, watching some practice. It's going to be awesome.
Do you remember, this might have been before you had reason to pay attention, but there was just like a morning, it was like report day morning, open clubhouse, probably like a dozen years ago for the Orioles beat. I was not on the beat at the time. I was home.
My first spring training, I think, was 2018 or 17.
Okay. But I don't know why I said okay, but this is before that. It was like the thick of the Buck Showalter era. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And and everyone just everybody got into the clubhouse, and it was just like a barrage of who's here, who's not tweets from the Orioles beat. And I think John Heyman and maybe one other nasty person was like, wow, Orioles beat had their coffee this morning. It was just all right, we are here and we are working.
I remember every year it was a question from the fan base of when is Chris Davis reporting? The final few years of Chris Davis's time in Baltimore, when the pressure was all on him to turn things around, it could be February 3rd and fans would be replying to tweets saying, where is Chris Davis? Why has he not reported yet?
All right.
As if showing up 3 days earlier would have helped him in any way.
Yeah. And I've actually been thinking about that a lot in the Chris Davis spring training experience. We're going to talk about spring training. So I think we could just, this is like a soft transition into it.
Spoiler, that is what we're talking about today.
Yeah, because really this is the last time, unless the Orioles do something, that we're going to be talking until we're there.
This is true.
Which makes it the last opportunity to preview spring training, which I know people are.
And if the Orioles do something, we're probably going to be talking about the thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
Not about...
not about spring training stuff. But I've been thinking about Chris Davis's spring trainings and the Chris Davis spring training experience and all that for a couple of reasons. A, because, I don't think this is going to happen with Pete Alonso, but that is we've already lived what it looks like if it doesn't go well. That's a small part.
Let's hope it doesn't go that way.
I don't think it will go that way, at least in the near term. I've been thinking about it more, and this is even worse, honestly, to say out loud, but I've been thinking about it in terms of Adley Rutschman and how he's going to come in and there's going to be the time when he stands at his locker and talks about how he feels and how great this offseason was. And then there will be opportunities to talk to him as spring training goes on. Really what's been going on, they're reporting at the BaltimoreBanner.com or thebanner.com, where you can subscribe for
$1 for 6 months.
$1 for 6 months. That he has been even less healthy than we knew, which was already a baseline of like not a healthy person. Had 2 IL stints for oblique strains last year. He was not his best self for going on like, gosh, it's almost if we talked about this for as being the case for the entirety of 2025 and through 2024 as well. Like since the Orioles got bad, he has not been, and like we're gonna find more about that. And it's all just like it is all valuable and good, and it is also like the meaning of it and the worth of it is completely dependent on what happens at the end of March when games
Right.
start. And like, I experienced this, and there's a couple of John Meoli Baltimore Sun bylines of Chris Davis. Like, actually in May I hurt my hand and I couldn't hit the whole year,
Right.
but now it doesn't hurt anymore, and now this is gonna be better. And like that is the truth. That is his truth. That is reportable, and like that is knowable. And also, if it doesn't mean that he's better once the game starts, it doesn't matter. So I'm very interested, in how this like what not what kind of Adley we get, but like what that leads to. It's
Right.
almost like this is all prologue, and it's almost like spring training is all just prologues to the real stuff. And
Yeah,
we're
it
just
is.
killing time until the season starts. But this is specifically a thing that I've been thinking a lot about.
I think that's fair because there is certainly a lot of pressure on Adley. And this was not one of the spring training storylines. We have a bunch of storylines that we're going to run through that we're going to be watching closely this spring. Adley Rutschman honestly didn't make it because there were so many other great storylines. But it is going to be fascinating to see what kind of shape he's in, how he's feeling mentally. Because last year, remember, he came into camp and he said, I want to feel a lot better. I was pissed with how things ended last season. 2024 obviously didn't end the way that he thought it was going to. Last couple months of the season, his production tailed off. He obviously had that bases loaded at bat in one of the Orioles' 2 playoff games where he looks at a strike right down the middle. That gets memed for an entire offseason. And he comes into spring training fired up. And you're thinking, we're going to get to see revived Adley Rutschman, and we didn't get to see it throughout most of the season. So I'm interested to see kind of what mood he's in, what mentality he's taking this spring. And there is not the same kind of pressure on him that there was on Chris Davis back in the day, but certainly there is a lot of pressure. There's a catcher behind him who is a 21-year-old phenom who just signed the biggest extension handed out in the Mike Elias era.
Yeah.
Adley Rutschman has 2 more years under team control. This is an important time for Adley Rutschman, and it's going to be fascinating to see just kind of what he looks like in spring training.
Yeah, and I think he'll be a good like personality wise like bellwether for what's going on, because these guys are going to be different just because they're trying to not make a good impression. Like there is a new manager, there's a new coaching staff. But I think they're going to want these guys to be themselves.
Yeah.
Like these are how many times we have to have the conversation about how they're like a little bit goofy. Some people will call them dorks sometimes. And they can just if they can just kind of enjoy that and be themselves, and like I don't think they need to be like, would it be cool and good if these guys were all just like completely locked in and like basically wearing like war paint every single day, like this is the most serious thing they've ever done, getting the Orioles back to being good? That would I suppose for the Baltimore Orioles be good if it worked out, and,
Right.
and like being absolutely militant about everything led to them winning 98 games in the AL East and a playoff series or 2. But is that really the way to go with this team? And like, it's going to be really fascinating because there's going to be baseball stuff that you'll be able to see once game starts and how the ball is leaving his bat and like the quality of contact and how the bats look. And there's going to be other stuff that, on the flip side won't matter. And it's just spring training. Like this is the first of like 2 months worth of conversations where we're like, spring training, like cool, but or cool and
right.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the Chris Davis thing too, and injuries playing their part in all of that, it felt like every offseason coming into spring training, Chris Davis said, well, I realized during the offseason that this was bothering me. At one point, I think he may have had LASIK eye surgery. Like he had all kinds of just about every little thing under the sun happen in the offseason that he was hoping was going to fix himself. going into the next season, and it just never worked. But fans always saw a little bit of hope in that okay, well, he fixed this. He got his eyes fixed. He, started a different. He bulked back up. He slimmed down.
Yeah.
He kept going back and forth, just trying new things. And you could look at those things during spring training and say, okay, well, maybe this version of Chris Davis will go back, and it just kept going down and down. And I do think it is so easy for us to see something like Gunnar Henderson's shoulder impingement that we didn't know about during the course of the season. We only found out about during this offseason. Something that he's talked about at Birdland Caravan as well, affecting his swing, affecting his attack angle, and perhaps leading to a little bit of a downtick in production. Of course, still a very good season for Gunnar Henderson 2025, but by his standards, not the caliber that we saw from Gunnar Henderson in 2024. And it's easy to just say, okay, well, that was a shoulder impingement. He'll be right back. Well, it may have been, and it may not have been. It's so easy to say Occam's razor. That was the thing that led to his down production, but that's not always the case. It could have been something else. It could have been mental, and who knows? Something else can always pop up every season. None of these guys get through the season fully healthy, and so for Adley Rutschman too, with his obliques, you'd say, all right, Adley's coming into spring training fully healthy. He's not dealing with the oblique issues. Maybe he'll come in different shape. Who knows? But that doesn't mean that everything's going to magically be fixed. That doesn't mean that was the only thing bothering him. And that doesn't, unfortunately, mean that something else isn't going to pop up. Last year, Gunnar Henderson had something pop up in the second or third week of spring training, kept him out a month, and sort of got his season off started on the wrong foot. He debuted in Kansas City a couple weeks into the season, and things just never picked up the way that we thought they were going to for Gunnar Henderson. So hope springs eternal. Everything is good and feels good right now, but we'll see.
Yeah. And so that was something that I wrote about off the Caravan, that like all of these guys at one point or another, even when they were on the field, were really limited by something. And like with Gunnar Henderson, that feels like if you showed, which I've just done, like pull up his baseball song page, like, wow, still hitting the ball hard, still taking the same kinds of at-bats and just not elevating the ball and having the slug. It's like that is something that you can easily draw. Like it's not a long line. It's not a swirly line. It's a pretty short direct straight line between a shoulder and like being able to generate like the loft that you want.
Sure.
We sat here in this room in May talking about Adley Rutschman, and everything under the hood looked exactly the same, except he was not hitting the ball as hard as he typically did. And it just stopped basically the moment that he had the ball fouled off his hand in June 2024. And that just feels like the type of thing that and I've made this resolution. I've written it 2 times now, and I've said it on this podcast multiple times that I am not going to, that is no longer the only satisfactory answer for me anymore. I'm at least opening my mind to there being other things going on. But as we are going to spring training and as we're pushing, towards the season, the reality is every single person on this team basically who's coming back has a huge gulf in what they were able to do last year in a season when A, the team was spiraling, B, they were physically limited, C, I don't think there's a C. A, their team was spiraling, B, they were physically limited, and like what they are projected to do this year. Adley Rutschman is projected to be 3.1 wins more valuable to the 2026 Baltimore Orioles than he was in 2025. That is basically like
two Adley Rutschmans.
But that's adding like another, like actually like there's no one.
That's like doubling his value.
Yeah, Colton Cowser is projected to be 2.6 wins. Period. It's like that is basically the gulf between Adley Rutschman 2025 and Adley Rutschman projected 26 is like good version of Colton Cowser.
Yeah, it's Adley Rutschman 8 Colton Cowser.
Yeah. Like Jordan Russ scored 1.9 more last year, and Fangraphs chart like is 4.3, 2.5 wins more. Colton Cowser is projected to be 2 wins more. Basayo O'Neal like 1.7 wins more each. Basayo wasn't hurt, but Gunnar 1 win more. All this stuff is like it creates a scenario where you can look at that and be like, oh, like interesting. And is every single person going to be 90% of how good they can be next year? No. But are more than who could we say was like 90% as good as they possibly can be in their career last year? Probably Gunnar Henderson.
Yeah.
You hope beyond hope that you can't say that about Jackson Holiday.
I was going to say Jackson Holiday,
Yeah,
maybe.
it may be Jackson Holiday, honestly.
Yeah.
But Gunnar Henderson, as like a 4.8 win player who couldn't elevate the ball for most of the season.
Yeah.
That's probably like that feels like it's like 75% of what, but more than one of them, more than zero of them will be like 90. I'm just rambling.
No,
But
but
it's such a interesting place for this team to be in because we're talking about Adley Rutschman via Chris Davis, which I'm sure is making people's like eyes either glaze over or explode, or I don't even know I don't know. But there's so much to be like thinking about in terms of what can make this team better, and they've already done a lot of it, and it's also like in that room, and it's going to look like it looked in the past, no matter whether that's true or not. Once we get to spring training and start laying eyes on these people and seeing them, because it's spring training and it's all just to use a phrase from the old era, it's all just eyewash. Like it doesn't matter at all. But it's going to look like it did, and it's going to make it easy to think that, oh yeah, this person can be 2 wins better than they were last year because they were hurt last year, and now they're not.
Right.
That's just how this is going to go.
Yeah, and I said this, I remember after the Orioles 2024 loss to the Royals in the playoffs, that the Orioles could have done whatever they wanted that offseason to improve the team in terms of adding players via free agency, in terms of trading for players. But ultimately, the next time they were going to be in the playoffs, the same guys were going to be in the lineup. Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westberg, Colton Cowser. They were all going to be in the lineup the next time they were in the playoffs, and they have to perform better than they performed in their first 2 tastes of the postseason, both in 2023 and 2024. And we're going to be talking a lot this spring about Pete Alonso, Taylor Ward, about Shane Baz being added to this rotation. Maybe if they add somebody else, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Framber Valdez or Zach Allen. We're going to be talking a lot about the new faces. But it's going to be incumbent on the old guard, the core of this team, to get better. And nothing changes. Pete Alonso could have an MVP level season. But if Colton Cowser looks like he did last year, if Adley Rutschman looks like he did last year, if Jordan Westberg misses as much time as he did, this team's not going to be good.
Yeah.
They have to be good. The guys that are the core pieces of this team still have to produce, no matter what your new additions are going to do for this roster.
Yeah. And that kind of makes it, and we're getting my stomping boots on. We're gonna stomp on the column.
Stomp on the column.
Step on it. Please, subscribe to Inside
read
the
it.
Dug. Yeah, read it also. But basically, yesterday I took all of the returning players who can be expected. There's more than 12 position or 13, but whatever, because there's new additions that'll be sprinkled in. But like basically the meaningful returning hitters, they're combined to last year 0.3 wins above replacement for that group, which is not that good.
Is this Fangraphs?
Fangraphs,
Yeah.
yes. By the Fangraphs depth chart ZiPS projection in 2026, they're up to 24.6, so 15.3 wins more by that group this year. The new additions, the pitching is basically a wash because you don't really know what the bullpen's going to look like.
Sure.
Kyle Bradish being available the full season, basically that gain is washed away by like some regression expected from like Rogers and Kramer, and like Povich is probably not going to pitch that much, so he can't produce that much. But you put Eflin, who isn't off-season addition, they went out and added him. Patrick was not on this team when the season ended. Now he is, so like I count that, and like all the free agents, trade acquisitions is like 12.9 wins. If they were banking on, and I will just be done with this point. You can respond. I'm not saying we are done, but I'm going to be done with this point once I say this. If they had just said, we can have 15 wins, like 15 more by turning on the lights and showing up again, and they added a bunch of like pitchers who the starters who like the best they can be is worth like a win, like they did a couple times last offseason. Or it didn't really add anything to the lineup except for guys who they thought fit like platoon needs, and like I think there was a little more expectation for Tyler O'Neill, but like as an everyday outfielder, but not the level of like Pete Alonso and Taylor Ward. If they were like, we can have like 15 or more, which is not how they would talk about it. I'm talking about it poorly, and I'm feeling self-conscious about that.
You shouldn't.
If they were like, we can do all this just by having these guys come back and be better, and we're not going to support that with too much on the addition side because we already have all this built in, that would feel like it was a bad idea.
Right.
And that would feel like it was a bad idea because we kind of just lived that. That just happened.
Yeah.
And
hope is not a strategy.
Yes, but taken all together, there's a lot that can be considered like that you can expect to be better. And I think that spring training will be all that just in one room on one field, like stretching at the same time. And it's just going to be really interesting to see all of that upside all together.
Well, that's why my first big storyline is Craig Alvarez's first spring training, because he's supposed to be the straw that stirs the drink. He is supposed to be the guy who gets the most out of these guys. That it's not like the Orioles just signed Pete Alonso and decided that he is going to be the only thing that changes this team. They made a change of manager. They hired somebody that they thought could come in and galvanize the guys and get them to play their best baseball. I'm fascinated to see how Craig Alvarez's first spring training is. I mean, on this podcast, he wouldn't go into too much detail. In the caravan, he wouldn't go into too much detail about what it's going to look like. He wants the players to show up and find out at the same time we do. He's not going to make proclamations through the media about what kind of spring training he's going to run. But I'm interested to see what kind of differences there are in a Craig Alvarez spring training as opposed to a Brandon Hyde spring training, if any.
Yeah. And I think it'll be interesting to see what those look like as well. I think it'll also be interesting to figure out how to communicate those. I've told the story that, it was like turning on like the TV and it going from like black and white to color in 2019 when like all of a sudden pitchers are throwing bullpens and there's portable TrackMans or like slow motion cameras behind them and they're playing music during workouts and the workouts are quicker because like you're not just doing stuff to do it. And like somebody at PR asked me at one point and he was like, yeah, you guys are kind of because Brandon Hyde's trying to like do his own thing. He didn't think any of it was remarkable. Like
right.
Mike Elias they had cameras in Houston. Now they have cameras here. Like Brandon Hyde worked for Joe Madden. They weren't doing a lot of like, I'm not saying it wasn't serious, but it was definitely not as buttoned up as it was in Baltimore under his predecessor. But they were like, you guys are kind of making it seem like it's summer camp down here. And it's like relative to what it was, it kind of is. Like, I don't think that necessarily left, but I think it's going to be interesting. You're not going to be, it's not going to look, I feel like it's not going to look or feel super different, but I feel like on the margins there's going to be differences.
For sure. Craig Alvarez did say he wants everything they do to have a purpose. There to be an intention behind everything they do. We're not just going to do things to do things, is what he said. So I'm wondering if there are differences in drills. I'm wondering if there's base running things, if there are certain fielding drills, whatever they do, that maybe he has an idea that might help this team if he starts to implement. The new faces that we're going to see. I mentioned a few of them. Pete Alonso, Taylor Ward, Shane Baz, Andrew Kittredge, sort of a new face, but he's back as well. Zach Eflin was here anyway, so can't really call him a new face, but a free agent that they brought back in.
I'm not rewriting the column. I'm not rewriting it, so he's a new face to me.
Yeah, that's fair. And then
Ryan Helsley,
another new face as well. We'll talk about him when we get into the bullpen battle as well. And then if they add somebody, I mean, we still are waiting on Framber Valdez and Zach Gallen and Chris Bassett, and we still have this rotation still does have a hole near the top. It still has an ace-sized hole. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be filled with Kyle Bradish, potentially, or Trevor Rogers if he repeats his awesome MVO 2025 season. But there's still a good chance that in the next week, the Orioles sign somebody that is going to fit in near the top of this rotation.
Yeah. And I think I've kind of arrived at, I think they need, I don't think they're going to let this be the end of the additions. It used to be that like once the Orioles signed a free agent starting pitcher to like a big-ish contract, that marked the end of the free agent period for pitchers because they were just signing the last guy left.
Yep.
That still might end up happening. But it's not, I'm not necessarily looking at it as if it's a hole at the top. But if you have Kyle Bradish and Trevor Rogers and Shane Baz and Zach Eflin and Dean Kramer, and you feel pretty good about those all it takes is one thing that you don't feel good about happening to it being a much less pleasant conversation.
Yeah.
Is Tyler Wells going to get stretched out? Is Tyler Wells going to be in the reserve as a depth option? Is Albert Suarez 2024 Albert Suarez or 2025 Albert Suarez? Then you're in the Brandon Young and Cade Povich conversation again, which is not a bad conversation to be in, but not a conversation you want to set out to have in March.
No, you want to be having that conversation. If you have to have that conversation in June.
Yeah, you want to put several layers of adult proven pitcher between yourself and that conversation.
Yeah.
As we're sitting here in February. So yes, there is a need for someone who has done the things that a Framber Valdez has done over the course of his career for longer than Kyle Bradish or Trevor Rogers. That is undeniable. I'm more looking at it as pretty much, I don't think, you don't stop betting on black just because it's been black 2 times. I think just because they've had like some of the most brutal injury luck possible doesn't mean it's going to run out. So all you are is one guy being delayed in spring training and having to be shut down for a couple weeks and restart his ramp from having questions in the back end of the rotation. So just that's a little more easily solved. I'm not going to sit here and feel good about it. I'm not going to call anyone like frozen pizza again, but yet, but I might.
Yeah. Zach Littell, I believe, was your frozen pizza when we talked about
and
free agent pitchers.
And gosh,
hey, DiGiorno's can hit the spot occasionally.
Yeah. Have you ever done that thing where they like freeze dry pizza? Like I think it's called like Gold Belly or something.
I don't think so.
They like say you can get like real foods, like real like places pizza sent to you.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Is it good?
Yeah, you can do it from like Sally's, the actual good pizza place in Connecticut, in New Haven. We're completely off the rails. Mike Farron, a fellow voice in the baseball industry, sent me some good deep dish pizza from Chicago when we had our first through that. So
nice. Gold Belly, founded as Gold Belly with 1 L. All right. More topics to talk about, more things we will be watching. Tyler Wells' role. You just talked about the rotation, and you didn't mention Tyler Wells in the first 5. I am curious to see what the Orioles' plan for Tyler Wells is, because he was kind of coy about what his envisioned role is when he talked to us in Birdland Caravan. I thought he would come out and say, I'm planning on being a starter and ramping up as if I were a starter. If they use me as a reliever, I'm happy to do that. He just kind of said, whatever they want from me, I will do. This rotation as it stands, maybe you could see a spot for him at the back end if they go to either a 6-man rotation or if somebody goes down during spring training, because when they brought him back last year after his elbow injury, he was used as a starter. That was just partly by nature of the fact that they had very few starting pitchers to work with.
Yeah.
But he can start. And you don't want to maybe see him 3 times through a lineup, but he can start games if you need him to. Is he going to be a reliever? Is he going to be a starter come spring training?
He is going to start games in spring training.
For sure.
Because he's a 31-year-old. Yeah. He's a 31-year-old grown up.
He will start Grapefruit League games.
He will start Grapefruit League games. He will probably, if I had to guess, start an early one. He will. You don't have to make a decision on like how someone's workload is going to be structured until probably early March, at early-ish, mid-ish, like if we're going to say mid, the early part of mid-March. I'm not going to give
a few weeks into games.
Yeah. It's basically everyone does the same thing, building up 1 inning, 2 innings, 3 innings maybe. And it's around the 2 or 3 inning area that we would probably see get some kind of clarity on Tyler Wells' role.
Yeah.
2 things are true. Tyler Wells, when he has been a healthy starter before in 2022, he kind of hit a wall. But he was really, really good. In 2023, he kind of hit a wall. But he was really, really good while he was out there. Maybe I'm thinking about different years. No.
Yeah. And then 2024, he goes down with the
2024
elbow injury.
when everyone's elbow started to happen. So I don't know I don't think you close the door on it, but on him starting, but I don't know how you keep it open in a way that makes sense for this roster right now. I mean, he's going to get, as long as you're paying him, I don't think he's going to want to go to Norfolk and be like a depth starter. I don't know that's something that's useful for the Orioles or him. I just don't see a world where I don't see an easy solution. But oftentimes when you're sitting in February trying to figure out somebody's role or how the roster thing is going to work, the easy solution is just to wait because something will happen that makes it very, very clear what the solution will be.
Yeah, these questions, so many of these questions answer themselves. I mean, the best laid plans will go awry.
Yeah,
the season doesn't start for 2 months, and by that time, so many guys will be down with injuries. But the example that I always use is before the 2024 season when we're plotting out the rotation and thinking about, wow, Corbin Burns is going to fit into the top of this rotation alongside Kyle Bradish, not knowing that Kyle Bradish had a platelet-rich plasma injection into his elbow.
He just blew out.
It was not long for that season. So a lot of these questions will answer themselves. And last year, I mean, a lot of guys showed up to spring training. Trevor Rogers and Chase McDermott, I believe, both showed up to spring training hurt. Stuff that we didn't know about. So the first day of spring training, we're going to get an update from Mike Elias. Last year, he did it in alphabetical order. He's going to run through all of the injuries that he hasn't talked about, that nobody's heard about for the last several months. And hopefully that's a short list. Yeah. But it will almost definitely have some names on it. Yeah. There's also stuff like this guy had issues getting here. This guy's wife is pregnant. Like there's all kinds of stuff that will lead to that.
Yeah. And I will say on Tyler Wells, what he has done when he has been in the rotation and working as a starter has basically been to be really, really valuable for the first 2+ months of the season.
Yeah.
If something does happen in spring training and somebody needs to go on the 60 and come back in June, that would be a nice transition from the time when things start to get a little squirrely for Tyler Wells into someone else coming into the rotation. So I'm not forecasting that, but there is a world where that happens and it's not the worst thing in the world.
Not to get too far down the road on Tyler Wells, but we are all the way down the road on Tyler Wells. The interesting thing for me is I don't believe, and you could correct me if I'm wrong here, he has ever gone back and forth in the middle of a season between starting and relieving. He has pretty much always started the season as a starter and then maybe been used as a reliever at the tail end, or started the entire season as a reliever. When they got him in the Rule 5 draft, they pretty much decided that he was going to be a reliever to start because he was coming back from...
He hadn't pitched in years.
Yeah, his Tommy John surgery. So they used him as a reliever. Then they convert him to a starter, I believe, in 2023, correct? Or was that 2022?
2022.
So they use him as a starter in 2022, and then he starts the entire season. 2023, they use him as a starter for the first half of the season, for the first 3 quarters of the season. Then he converts to a bullpen role. It's so much easier to do that because you ramp the guy up as a starter. You get his arm ready to start a lot of games, and then you just throw him in the bullpen at the end of the year. And it's a lot easier from a workload perspective, from a wear and tear perspective. But I am curious because the Orioles brought back Albert Suarez on a minor league deal. Is there a possibility that Tyler Wells could be an Albert Suarez, somebody who does bounce back and forth between starting and relieving? My issue with that would be, this is a guy who has had a lot of arm issues over the course of his career. That is asking a lot of guys. And the Orioles did that with Albert Suarez in part because he was a veteran. And they were like, hey, if you want your big league shot, you're going to have to do the hardest thing that a pitcher can do, which is go back and forth between the rotation and the bullpen. So I think the Orioles would not like to do that. But maybe there's a chance that they use him as a swingman.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely possible. I think it would probably be in a more structured way. But I think that's on the table. Yeah. I think that it would be, as the roster and the organizational depth is constructed right now, it would be an active choice to say you are going to be a short reliever, Tyler Wells, sitting here at the beginning of February. If he shows up and sits down and with Craig Albernaz and Drew French and Mitch Plasmeyer and Ryan Klimek and they kind of get down to what his season is going to look like. If they say right now you are going to be a short reliever, that would be the only thing that would make me curious, because that would mean you're just taking a depth starting piece off the table now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, pretty much anything's on the table.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about the bullpen because Tyler Wells does factor into it. Coming up with the locks for this bullpen, you can feel free to add anybody that you want to this list. I only had 2 guys. I only had Ryan Helsley as your closer and Andrew Kittredge, who you brought back, you traded for because the Cubs picked up his team option. Other than that, I have a whole lot of guys that I think could make it. There's a long list. I've got Cade Stroud. I think he is closer to inside the bubble than outside the bubble, but I wouldn't call him a lock. You've got Yarmir Geraldo. You've got Rico Garcia, Colin Selby, Dietrich Enns, Chase McDermott, Anthony Nunez, Cameron Foster, Jose Espada, Grant Wolfram. Am I forgetting anybody?
I think Keegan Aiken is probably a lock.
Aiken, yeah.
He's probably a lock, although he's in the arbitration process right now. So I believe if you don't agree to a salary and you go to arbitration, a team can release you in spring training for like 20% of that if they want to. I don't think the Orioles would want to, but
No.
if in this timeline that we're living in where they are going to arbitration with Keegan Aiken and he's not who he wants to be, the Orioles did this a decade ago, at least with Miguel Gonzalez, where they just cut him like the week before the season ended and got like and paid him like, you know, $1 million versus like $6 million. I don't think they would do this. I don't think there's any reason to do that, but otherwise I would think Keegan Aiken is in that.
I would too. And then Yennier Cano,
I'm not locking that up. I'm not calling that a lock.
I'm not calling that a lock either, considering how last season went. So maybe 3 locks at this point, and then just a whole bunch of we'll see. I think there still is room for one addition. I to be honest, I would say I'm surprised that the Orioles haven't made more additions to their bullpen, but I feel like the bullpen market, the reliever market, has been moving especially slow, which it usually is. It's usually the last market in free agency to get going because that's the last thing teams think about. They spend their big money on bats and starters, and some of the big starters still haven't been signed. So once that dust settles, maybe that reliever market will start to get going. But I thought the Orioles might add one more guy there, and they still could.
Yeah, they still can. And, looking at who's available, I'm not going to just start listing guys, but I don't know if there's any needle movers, but there's certainly some grown-ups who have pitched a lot and pitched well. And
Danny Coulombe's still out there, right?
Danny Coulombe, yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, I kind of think the same thing. I think if you are not limited by the amounts of money that you can spending like $5, $6, $7 million on a grown-up reliever is a risk, but also one that you're not going to. So the worst thing that happens is it doesn't work out.
Yeah, don't lose sleep over that.
But among all the names you mentioned, excuse me, I think this year is ripe for the Orioles to have someone emerge.
Yeah,
maybe multiple someones from this kind of crew.
Cade Stroud.
Yeah, Stroud.
Dietrich Enns was good last year.
They really like Anthony Nunez.
Yep.
I think they are constantly making, high risk, high reward bets in like minor league free agents, that guys we've never even heard of right now. In 2 weeks there will be in this year's Yarmir or who was the guy last year, Rodolfo Martinez.
Yes.
Yeah, there will be, but there's going to be a guy who like punches 15 tickets and like gives up 1 run in 10 spring training innings and is the talk of camp, who never throws a pitch for the 2026 Baltimore Orioles. And there's also going to be a guy who does all that, who is on the roster on opening day and is a meaningful part of this bullpen. It's
right.
just Felix Bautista was not somebody anybody was thinking about being part of this team.
Yeah,
going into his first big league camp, and he was a meaningful part of the team.
He was very meaningful. Yeah,
that was an offseason where they did a lot of these types of things, and I think they can again.
And I'm curious to see if Cade Povich follows kind of a similar path to Keegan Aiken, perhaps, as a lefty, started out as a starter his first couple of years. And I'm looking at the rotation. If there isn't room for Tyler Wells, there certainly isn't room for Cade Povich right now.
Yeah.
Maybe his issues have been the third time through the order. How do you mitigate those issues? Don't give him three ups.
Yeah, but that comes into this kind of the same. I feel like they just kind of decided one spring, like Keegan Aiken, you are now our reliever.
Right.
Somebody has to be. As I'm saying out of one side of my mouth, like I don't want these conversations of like who's going. Like I don't want to get as far down the list as we are. That has to be a list. There has to be some people on that list. So that would be the only thing that gave me pause there is that planning for the worst thing to happen. Sometimes it could be like 2025 where it turns out even worse than that. And sometimes it can be, modest badness that you're planning for and trying to react to, but someone has to be on that list.
For sure.
And I think Cade Povich, given his youth, given they still probably like the stuff, I would be less inclined to let that happen now.
Yeah, there needs to be some break glass in case of emergency. Let's talk about some of the injured guys. I'm curious to see where Zach Eflin is in his recovery from back surgery. He talked about, hopefully coming back early in the season. That was a pretty intensive back surgery that he underwent midway through last year. I believe in August is when he had that surgery, which shut him down for the remainder of the season. But he sounds positive. He sounds upbeat. Zach Eflin's always a great guy to talk to. I hope we get to talk to him in spring training and see how he's doing. Felix Bautista, of course, recovering from his multiple surgeries. I guess it was one surgery, but they did two things during the shoulder surgery that he had. That was a 12-month timetable for him. But, is he there? Is he? I'm can't imagine he would be throwing, but what kind of apparatus does he have in his arm or his shoulder, if nothing, if anything? Yeah. And then Heston Kjerstad, somebody that we didn't talk about last week, that Craig Albanez said he expects to be full go at the start of spring training. He's somebody that we've just kind of left off of our list when creating imaginary 2026 lineups and rosters, because last year was such a disastrous season. The Orioles expected him to be a big part of their team in 2025. They lose Anthony Santander. They're saying we can recreate Anthony Santander in the aggregate between Tyler O'Neill hitting from the right side and Heston Kjerstad hitting from the left side. And it just never worked out that way. He had negative WAR. He had issues in the outfield. And he has, going back to, shortly after he was drafted in 2020, when he had myocarditis, he has had these very unfortunate things happen over the course of his career, getting hit in the head and having concussion issues. And then last year, starts out the season so poorly, gets sent back to the minors, and then gets shut down for the rest of the season. And we don't know exactly what has been ailing him. We've just kind of heard that's something Heston will talk to you about when he's ready to talk to you about. So to hear that he's ready to go for spring training is exciting, but he is a big old mystery box at this point.
Yeah, and as you're saying this, I'm actually looking up whether who had combined better seasons, Heston Kjerstad and Tyler O'Neill or Anthony Santander, and I'm thrilled to tell you that
I'm pretty sure it's even.
I'm thrilled to tell you that those two Orioles hit a combined 196 with 13 homers. And a 76 weighted runs created plus, 631 OPS. Anthony Santander. I don't know why I said Anthony.
Anthony,
not Italian like me. He is from Venezuela, I believe. I don't know how they say his name there. He had a 565 OPS and a 61 weighted runs created plus. So
slightly worse.
So, I don't think anybody necessarily won those transactions.
No, there was a lose-lose.
I think the Orioles are probably not going to fly a flag about that. But the Blue Jays were within inches of winning the World Series as it was without Anthony Santander doing that. But I have not done that exercise until right now. And I feel stupid for having done it, but I am also smiling having done it. So that's,
Yeah, neither...
I contain multitudes.
Neither team got exactly what they wanted out of those transactions.
I do think, though, to address your actual point that you made, I don't think Tyler O'Neill necessarily goes into the category of players I'm talking about, but I think that Heston Kjerstad and Kobe Mayo and Ryan Mountcastle do. And I think Taylor Ward's a varsity version of this, so he's kind of on this. But how many of those four players, and we'll put Tyler O'Neill in that mix, do you think are meaningful contributors to the Baltimore Orioles this year? In a way that this is a two-part question. How many are meaningful contributors to you? If I said two, is that too many?
The fact that we're sitting here on February 4th and Kobe Mayo and Ryan Mountcastle are still on the team while Pete Alonso is on the team is weird to me still. It's still bizarre. I still feel like one or more of those guys will be gone by the time we start the season because there's just no room for them. It would be unfair to Kobe Mayo to send him back down to AAA because he was great in the final couple weeks of the season and he's shown that he should be given a chance to be a big leaguer. And Ryan Mountcastle can be a nice bench bat, but do you really want another right-handed hitting first baseman? And maybe you give him a better opportunity to play somewhere else. I feel like it's very weird that all three of these right-handed hitting first basemen are here. So I have a hard time answering that question. And then Tyler O'Neill is a big old mystery box because he barely played last year.
Yeah.
I don't know. All to say, I have no idea.
I should have asked the second part of that question first. This is my second year as a podcaster, but I'm getting better, but
you certainly are
good.
You still are. You are good.
How many do they need from that? How many are you sitting here saying, as you look at what the Orioles can be, how many of those four players that whose contributions were modest at best do the Orioles need?
They need them to combine for positive WAR. I mean, that's clear.
Yes, but when I say that, it's God forbid something happens to Pete Alonso injury-wise. They're going to need one of those two right-handed hitting first basemen to be good.
Yeah.
Their outfield still doesn't make a ton of sense. They're going to need one of Tyler O'Neill or Heston Kjerstad to be good. This is not the time to sit here with a crystal ball and say that one's going to be good or that one's going to be good. The challenge, the assignment, the goal is to make all of them be good. That would be, if we're talking about like making huge bets on hypotheticals, imagine a world where all of them are just good and there's not enough spots in this lineup. Not because there's not enough positions to put people in, but there's too many people hitting at one time.
Yeah.
Champagne problems. But they're going to need this group. They're going to need that group. And I don't know I don't know what Tyler O'Neill's role is going to be, period. If we're talking about an outfield with Taylor Ward and Dylan Beavers and Colton Cowser and him and Leody Taveras, if I don't know what his role is going to be, but I do know that the Orioles, in the same way that I remember in 2023 thinking about like, wow, this rotation is awesome.
Yeah.
No, 2024, I'm sorry. The Orioles rotation was awesome. Also, all of the depth was in the rotation at that point. Albert Suarez was pitching well. Tyler Wells was pitching well. That was right around when the injuries started, but there was nowhere to go after that.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go after these guys. So I feel like I find myself drawing a very hard line underneath them, being like, look, I don't know how it's going to work out either, but I know that some of it needs to work out, and I know that you need to create as long of a runway to figure out how it's going to work, and give yourself as much time and space as possible to make 1, 2, 3, 4 of these players productive. You need to figure that out because there are really no alternatives beyond them. And I think that's it's not good for discourse. We're surely going to have this conversation, if not once, then 15 times in the next 2 months. But I think there's going to be such a need for more of these players than we think, that the sole goal is to make sure they're useful when that need arises, and B, allow yourself to be in position to benefit from that when that need does arise.
Yeah, and this brings us to our final storyline, which is the bench. What is the bench going to look like? You just talked about all of the names in the outfield, at DH, at first base, that could be in competition there. How about the infield? There really isn't a great option to back up anybody on the left side of the diamond.
They're each other.
Yeah, they're each other. They're each other's insurance, which is dangerous.
Yeah,
because you were counting on a few players to fill a lot of different roles. I mean, it's Jackson Holliday can play short in a pinch. He, in addition to being the second baseman, Jordan Westbrook can play short in a pinch. He can play second base in addition to being third baseman. Gunnar Henderson can play third base. He's even played second base in his career. So they are each other's insurance. But at the same time, I'm sure Craig Albarnez would like to have somebody to bring off the bench if he needs to, or somebody who could fill in for a few days while somebody is hurting. We know that Jordan Westbrook has struggled a lot with injuries over the course of his career. Gunnar Henderson has missed time. Jackson Holliday's missed time. So, you'd like to have some depth there. Jeremiah Jackson seems like the most likely candidate just because he was great for the final month of the regular season last year and can play multiple positions, but he's not really a shortstop. And Who else do they have? Brian Ramos is somebody that they just traded cash for, but they're probably going to DFA him at some point and hope he can sneak through waivers. Sorry, buddy. Luis Vasquez is still in the organization. They keep going through this rigmarole of adding guys off waivers, DFAing them, hoping that they clear waivers and stay in their organization so that they're building up this kind of depth at AAA, which is the way to do it, because that's the way that they handled first base, a left-handed hitting first baseman back in the day, and that's a process that got them Ryan O'Hearn. So keep doing it throughout the offseason, keep building up depth, and then hope that somebody shows up to Sarasota and surprises you.
Yeah, and we tried to nail Craig Albanez down on that, on what he wants his bench to look like, and he, when you give somebody an out in an interview, they usually take it.
Yeah, you gave him an out.
I gave him an out, and but I think
you were like, what do you want to see in a bench bat? Do you want somebody who's
somebody who could hit or somebody who can't hit? And he was like,
both.
Yeah. It's like, congratulations. Bad job by me. But he did say also that they plan on, playing matchups a lot. And I feel like you can't really do that if your bench bat this is slanderous, but it's not slanderous for the person I'm thinking about that you're thinking I'm thinking about. If your bench option is Luis Vasquez, you are not pinch hitting for Luis Vasquez into a game very often.
He's not pinch hitting.
He's not pinch hitting for somebody. And you are probably not winning the game that he enters because he entered the game.
Yeah.
And that's all this is. This is trying to win as many games as possible in a division where a lot of teams are going to win a lot of games. And I think the Orioles are going to have a bench that doesn't make sense for a long time, but but if that's the case and things go according to plan, it'll be because they have a team that makes sense wins and losses wise sitting here at the end of September.
Yeah. It's really not a huge deal at this point, who gets the 26th spot on the 26-man roster. It would be nice to see if Jeremiah Jackson grabs a hold of that spot, because he, in theory, does check a bunch of boxes for you. And it's a fun story to see somebody who's still pretty young and, was kind of stuck in the minors for years come up through their system. And it could be a nice success story.
For sure. I don't think I told the story, but, Buck Britton obviously worked with Manny Machado, knew Manny Machado from his time here. And when they went to San Diego, coaching third base, Manny Machado standing there. Jeremiah Jackson hit that tank of a home run, and he told Buck Britton, he's like, people don't hit that ball there.
Yes.
And that is what you're playing for with Jeremiah Jackson. I don't think you're playing for Manny Machado level third base. I think you're playing for Manny Machado, observing that he hit a ball where a team that has a lot of dudes doesn't have guys that hit the ball.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let us know what you're looking for this spring training. Let us know if you'll be down there in Sarasota. Stop by at some point at the Ed Smith Stadium complex, and we can maybe say hello. I'm
available to say hello.
Yeah, I'm available to say hello. We'll just be watching baseball and soaking up some vitamin D. It's going to be great. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. Read all of John's great newsletters inside the dugout, thebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. Write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, by the way, and I will read it out here on the show. I have just 1 week to watch all the Fast and Furious movies. I didn't do it last night, so I'm sorry.
Do you think we do this again before our planned spring training will start?
I do. I think we have a live show. And what's good about this is that we didn't spend the whole time talking about will they, won't they on Framber Valdez. So people can, if they sign Framber Valdez, they can listen to that show and then go back and listen to this episode too, because they're complementary. They're not overlapping.
Love that for everyone.
Like the episode we did on Pete Alonso the day before the Orioles signed him. People could have just thrown that out because we were just like, will they sign Pete Alonso? And then they did the next day.
I think I was like falling asleep during that, so I can't even tell you what
it was. Hopefully they were good episodes. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. We're really excited for baseball. I'm excited to be out of the cold. I'm excited to be out of the snow. The way that things have gone, went on the football side of things. I think everybody is ready for a fresh start in this city, sports-wise. And so it's going to be fun. Should be a fun time. We're excited. Thanks so much for tuning in. For John Meoli, I'm Paul Mancano. We'll catch you next time.